Hi guys, I'm Hillary Macmillan. I'm a Canadian fashion designer and I've been in business since 2013. We produce our collections in Canada, in China, in India, in the United States. We've produced all over the world. We import and we export. We do direct to consumer as well as wholesale and to other companies. And so I'm going to give you a rundown a bit on what are tariffs, why they're such a hot button topic, and what it means for you as a Canadian. So essentially, you should look at tariffs as a taxing on a tax. Like it is essentially a tax. It's a percentage on the cost of the goods. So a 25% tariff is you're paying 25% on top of what the cost of the good is that you are importing or into the United States or back into Canada, because we'll be doing retaliatory tariffs the same way that US is imposing tariffs on Canadian goods. So it is a tax on top of what you're already paying in duties and taxes. So when you import something to Canada, if you are a company or you are just a regular shopper, you are paying, and it's not made in Canada, you are paying a duty and taxes. So on top of the good that you get. And so I don't know if you've seen this when you've checked out at certain places, it'll be like duties and taxes are included. It'll ask if you want to include it. Sometimes it's just pushed into the price of the goods and you don't even know about it. Sometimes you pay when you go pick it up at the post office or UPS or FedEx or DHL or whatever it is. You're paid, that fee that you're paying is the duties and taxes. And it is different for every single item. So CBSA, which is our border control, has a huge list of HS codes, which is what we use to essentially, it's a numbering system that used to identify products. So every single item, depending on what it's made out of, where it's from, and what it is, has a different HS code. And so, for example, like, this is not accurate, but a code is like 63104.44.22, and it's a long number. And that kind of indicates the country of origin, indicates what it is and what's it made of, specifically for apparel. So that'll be like 100% cotton shorts, women's shorts, or it'll be like synthetics or from China or whatever. And every item has a different duty amount on it. So for example, importing from China, we pay about an 18% duty. It's anywhere 16 to 18%. And you pay on top of that tax. So that is already a thing that's happening. If you are buying from a company like Zara that has warehouses within Canada, they're already absorbing the duties and taxes they're paying on it, and they're just putting on top of the final goods cost. So you technically will be paying for it, but you just don't know you're paying for it because it's already absorbed into the price of the goods. Same with if you're buying from us, all of our duties and taxes and everything we pay go into the final price cost of good. That also goes into what it costs to make it, which is CMT, which is cut, make, trim. That actually involves making the garment, and then duties and taxes on top of that, transportation costs, etc., whatever things you're putting into the final cost of things is what the cost is, and it's pushed onto the consumer. When you have to add tariffs on top of that, that's another tax that's levied on top of that, and that makes it more expensive. So for Canadian business owners, exporting your goods to the United States, potentially, we have a 30-day stay, could have a 25% tariff on top of that. So if you are sending something to a customer that is ordered online from you, or you're sending it to a wholesale account, you will be paying a 25% duty on top of whatever taxes and duty that's already applied onto it. So the tariff on top of that. Now, an interesting thing that went into effect that was part of Donald Trump's executive order that he was signing was ridding of the de minimis rule, DE space MINIMIS, de minimis rule. So that is, every country has a de minimis amount. So for Canada, ours is $20. So anything over $20, you are paying duties and taxes on, unless there is a free trade agreement. So for example, with Italy, we have CETA, which is our free trade agreement with Italy. And so we don't get charged any duties on anything you import. Like we import a lot of fabric from Italy. We don't charge duties on that. We are still charged taxes, but not duties. So going to the States, if he gets rid of the de minimis rule, which for them is $800, which is very high. It was $200 in 2016, and they increased it to $800. And the purpose to increase it was back and forth travel. So like if you wanted to buy something in the US or you wanted to ship something for personal use, they wouldn't charge like an American any duties and taxes, something if it was under $800. A lot of companies use this as loopholes, and we can get into the Shein and the Temu conversation of it, but essentially anything we ship to a customer in the US, if it's under $800, the customer doesn't have to pay duties and taxes on it. We don't have to worry about it. We're not absorbing it. And so it's going forward. So on top of, if he implies a 25% tariff plus gets rid of the de minimis rule, you are paying a 25% tariff. You're paying duties and a tax rate on anything that's importing to the United States. Now, if you're a Canadian, you're like, why does this matter to me? Because it's technically going to be pushed onto the American consumer. And that is correct. It is the end user that pays for all these fees. However, you have to ask yourself as a small business owner, if you've had consistent prices forever, and then all of a sudden an American goes to the post office and they're trying to pick up the blazer or the pants they ordered for you, and all of a sudden they have to pay 40% more, 35%, whatever it works out on your duty rate, more for that good when they pick it up, which it would be a huge hit. They might reject the shipment. They don't want to pay for it, which then comes back to us. We don't get refunded for the shipping costs. So there's a potential for constant items to be rejected. They might flat out not want to buy it if you put it in your cart. You can add on the duties and taxes at the end. So there's realities to that. So yes, at the end of the American consumer has to absorb it, but they might not just choose to do business with you. And so this is a decision a Canadian business will have to make, is are they going to absorb the cost? Are they going to push it onto the American consumer? Or are they going to just simply not ship to the United States anymore? A lot of Canadian business rely on American people buying their stuff. Our countries are so intertwined. We buy stuff from them, they buy stuff from us. And so it's a reality that you have to think about. There is one saving grace, and it's not a good one, is that our exchange rate our dollar is so bad compared to the United States. I think we're at 0.68 right now to one, so 0.68 cents of our dollar to $1 US. That's kind of where we're sitting. So it's about 30% less than their dollar, which roughly is approximately the tariff, plus if the de minimis rule goes away, that's roughly the taxes and the duties on top of that go into a place. So what you could do is you could absorb the duties, the tariffs, and the taxes and make US and Canadian prices par. So essentially you would be getting the same amount of, you'd be getting the exchange rate difference to cover that kind of stuff. The saving grace in this is, I find, because the United States dollar is the dominant currency globally, it's accepted everywhere. Most Americans don't listen to or don't actively search out what exchange rates are like we are doing in Canada, or aren't affected by it because their dollar is king. So like, even if their dollar is not doing well globally, it's still the prominent dollar. So they don't always pay attention to exchange rate differences. Is what we've experienced as a company, is that a lot of even other businesses we work with in the US don't always, even large businesses we work in the US, don't understand the exchange rate differences. And so that could play to your favor of your Canadian business. You could make your prices on par and absorb the duties and taxes and the tariffs. Yes, your customer would see a jump in their costs if they shop with you a lot. So that would be a downfall, is, well, they now want to spend with you if you've absorbed the tariffs and then your costs are 30% higher. These are all things businesses have to weigh, and this is why so many Canadian businesses are freaked out. It's because, yes, for certain exports like oil and gas, which are only maybe subjected to a 10% tariff, they're going to absorb, the American population is going to absorb it because they need those products. Something discretionary spending on clothing, Americans don't necessarily need our clothing. And so if they want to pay 30% more, are they going to do it? So it's a very scary time for Canadian businesses if you rely on American dollars for your company. So this is why the support local and support Canadian within our own country is so important, especially if we have retaliatory tariffs, and then the prices of goods to ship back to us also becomes expensive. You're already technically paying duties and taxes on US based goods because most things you buy are over $20. But if you add a tariff on top of that, the prices of that is also going to get more expensive. So it's good to support local. Now the China conversation. So the US did go ahead with a 10% duty on all Chinese imports, as well as got rid of the de minimis rule for them. So this is a big impact on companies like Shein and Temu, and Amazon Haul, I think, is something that it imports directly from China to compete with Temu and Shein. They're going to be charged this. They've been going under this $800 de minimis because they don't send large bulk shipments, they send directly to consumer, and everything's relatively inexpensive. They've been using the de minimis rule to their advantage and taking advantage of it. Why wouldn't they? I mean, everyone does. So they're now going to be hit really hard with the realities of paying this, and knowing them, they're not going to absorb the cost. So the American consumer is going to absorb it. So American consumer might think twice about buying from Shein or Temu if they get to the post office and they have to pay this additional price on it, because it's annoying. You know, you pay for something you expect to be the final price, and then you have to go and spend more money on it. Like, I feel like every Canadian has experienced this when you've imported something. You're like, why am I paying $30 extra? And then if you return it, it's not like you get refunded. You have to go through a whole process to get refunded the duties and taxes, and most just eat it. So they get their return price back, but they don't get the refund of their duties and taxes. So now what does that mean? If you have Chinese goods that you produce in China, in Canada, that you're then going to export to the United States, unfortunately, you are subject to these duties, taxes, and the tariffs. So you also, and the de minimis rule. So you also will have to pay, even if it's coming from Canada and if your country of origin is China, it's subjected to the tariffs, the duties, and taxes as well. So that's something to think about. If you're a Canadian company and you produce your stuff in China and it's here in Canada, that is a reality now that you have to deal with. So it's something to think about. It's something to have, you know, a strategy in place. But this is what's happening right now with this tariff conversation between Canada and the United States. It's complicated. It's a lot to understand. It's a lot to go into it. And I can imagine it can be very frustrating for Americans, because they're used to being able to import stuff with now duties and taxes on it. And now on top of tariffs, they're going to also have to pay for the duties and taxes. So it's an interesting time. We're, as a company, we have all these strategies in place of how we're going to deal with it. But it is very kind of an interesting topic. Now, if you want any more information on tariffs, this was a kind of a very overlay of it, a very broad look at it to kind of give you an idea of what the reality is for Canadian business and for Canadians and for Americans. But it does, when you look at it, it does on its head seem to encourage you buying stuff within, if you can, within your own country, and kind of reducing this importing of stuff that isn't necessary. So like a dress from Shein or a dress from Temu, etc. So I'm not sure what it holds. I mean, if the tariffs get subjected onto Canadian goods, it's going to be an interesting conversation. It's not an interesting conversation. It could potentially be devastating, you know, the talk about what happens to our economy. So now more than ever, even though we have a 30-day reprieve and a pause, I still think going forward with trying to support as much Canadian as possible, support local businesses, support each other, we're all in this together, I think is really important. So that's my 2 cents on tariffs, duties, taxes, all the fun stuff we don't want to think about, but we unfortunately are now forced to. So sound off in the comments if you want to hear anything else, or if you're interested in specific questions, I'll try to answer them. It's going to be an interesting ride. These 5 years for Canadians have been a bit crazy, you know. We went COVID, recession, tariffs, another recession maybe. So we'll see. But we're in it together, and as long as we support each other, I see like we're going to come out on top.